Growing protests against the federal presence in Minneapolis has prompted President Trump to threaten to invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy the military. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison said he would challenge any such move in court. Joining me now is Washington Stand reporter Casey Harper. Casey, can you give us more context on what led to President Trump's threats to deploy the military in Minneapolis?
Sure, Tony. I mean, really, this all began with a several billion, some say $9 billion, some say $18 billion fraud investigation that was linked to the Somali migrant community largely, and actually was exposed in part because of Somali whistleblowers. This led President Trump to send in a surge of federal agents for deportations, which sparked mass protest in Minneapolis, and then that fateful and unfortunate run-in where Renee Good was fatally shot by an ICE officer after allegedly trying to run him over with their vehicle. That sparked major protests. And now President Trump says that Minnesota officials have essentially lost control of the city, and he warns he could even deploy troops under the Insurrection Act. Now, these protests further intensified after we had, unfortunately, another ICE shooting where a Venezuelan man allegedly attacked an ICE officer with a shovel and was shot, though he was not killed. So that, there's good news there. But it's, of course, already a powder keg situation. It's just getting worse as local, state, and city Democrats accuse ICE of racial profiling, excessive force, and violating residents' rights. Now, Minnesota has sued the federal government, and a judge is weighing whether to block ICE's involvement, but it really does feel like a powder keg in Minneapolis, Tony.
All right, we'll explore that a little bit more later. Here in Washington, the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, which is led by Senator Ted Cruz, they held a hearing this afternoon examining how excessive screen time, as on computers and phones, etc., and social media are affecting children's mental health and their learning. Now, as lawmakers weigh new limits on tech use by minors, Casey, give us some of the highlights that came out of today's hearing.
Yeah, Tony. Well, Mom always warned you not to sit too close to the television, and I think she's been proven right. An iPad is no better, and there's a lot of research coming out on this, which the lawmakers pointed to. And the research links, heavy screen use to attention problems, poor learning outcomes, and even mental health issues. Here's what Senator Cruz said today at the hearing.
In 2023, 1 out of 5 children had a mental or behavioral problem diagnosis. We've also seen significant increases in child and teen suicide rates. Something is very wrong. And I don't believe it is merely a coincidence, as our witnesses will discuss today, that these harms are rising alongside the early and excessive use of screens.
Now, Senator Cruz and Senator Brian Schatz are advancing bipartisan legislation to restrict some social media access for minors and curb the addictive nature of algorithms. Now, the committee also is questioning federal policies that promote digital devices in the classroom, questioning, Tony, is there really evidence that putting an iPad in the classroom really helps kids?
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting, Casey, because a lot of these schools have gotten away from textbooks and they've gone to computers and iPads. Yeah, this is going to be very interesting. All right, turning to international news, as Iran's Islamic regime continues to crack down on the protesters, the U.S. has imposed sanctions on the country, which has really kind of tightened the economic vice that the country was already in with some of the sanctions. And of course, it was those economic conditions that triggered this latest protest against the government. Casey, it would appear that the pressure that the Trump administration has been putting on the regime is working.
Yeah, Tony. I mean, we've seen a sort of a stall, according to Iranian state media and others, on these executions, which were really, troubling to the world, but to the Trump administration. He was calling on the Iranian government to stop the executions, as you mentioned earlier. Maybe over 2,000, around 2,500 people killed. It's hard to get reliable data out of Iran, especially when they're shutting down texting and the internet. But those are the numbers we have. But now we have evidence or reports that they have paused those killings. Now, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that President Trump, he wants the violence to end, and he said the U.S. stands behind the Iranian people. Meanwhile, American ambassador to the UN today at the UN Security Council, he leveled some pretty targeted words at the regime. Here's what he said a few moments ago.
This is a regime that rules through oppression, through violence, and through intimidation, and has destabilized the Middle East for decades. Well, enough is enough. We all have a responsibility to support the Iranian people and to put an end to the regime's neglect and oppression of the Iranian nation. Colleagues, let me be clear. President Trump is a man of action, not endless talk like we see at the United Nations. He has made it clear all options are on the table to stop the slaughter.
So, Tony, we've seen some encouraging signs, but we're not out of the woods yet in Iran.
All right, Casey, thanks so much. We'll talk with you a bit later.